All right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Happy Human Rights Day to all. I think before I begin, and if I might, I think I'd like to begin on a sort of a story. So when I was a kid, I sort of had this dream of working with the UN. I thought, to me, that was the idea of cool. You know, that was what was like. Those were the sort of superstars to me. You know, I yeah, closer to them. All right. Yeah. So the idols that I sort of grew up with as a kid, the typical Aung San Suu Kyi, Nelson Mandela, and then after that, later on, Obama himself. So yeah, that was my ideal. That was sort of my dream, the sort of stuff that I wanted to be when I wanted to grow up. And then right about the time that Obama was finishing his first term as elected president, I think everything started to go downhill. Obama refused to stand up for whistleblowers, the right to transparency, right to free speech. And then Suu Kyi came along. She refused to stand up for the rights of the Rohingyas, persecuted, active genocide going on. Okay, silence, deafening silence. Justin Trudeau, as well. He continues to be actively pursuing billion-dollar arms deals with the violently unstable Middle East. So, I'd like to quote the classic preamble of the UDHR. Human rights are universal and inalienable, indivisible, interdependent, and interrelated. The people that I once considered really cool to be my ideal, the sort of defenders of human rights across the world. I mean, why were they making these lapses? Why were they doing these things? You know, it suddenly became a little bit hard to stand with them. By the time I was a teenager, I was pretty jaded. You know, I was looking around the world, whistleblowers. I was looking at the Middle East. You know, I was looking at the sort of double standards that a lot of the defenders of human rights had. And I still believed in human rights, but I sort of felt like there was no meaningful change that we could make. I sort of changed my mind when I joined civil society in Singapore. So I worked with Project X, which focuses on sex workers' rights. And I think the thing that was beautiful to me was that at no point, at least up till now in my foray into civil society, have I seen a sort of double standard. Have I seen a refusal of solidarity. Vanessa Ho, who runs Project X, is very concerned with the work that SADPC does in relation to the death penalty. Terry as well. Last year when we were covering a story about men using counterfeit money to cheat sex workers of their money and their services. He was up at 2 a.m. yesterday, 2 a.m. last year, taking down the notes of the case, writing the article on it, publishing it, publicizing the issue. M. Ravi as well, who works with the death penalty, needs no introduction. He has been very supportive of Project X, sex workers' rights, as well as trying to talk to the younger voters, the new generation, talking to them about human rights through various social media platforms. Aware has worked with Project X. Wake Up Singapore has worked with the death penalty campaign. AFA has worked with Home, and Marwa has tied up with young artists and innovators. So I reiterate, this shows me nothing other than that human rights are universal, inalienable, indivisible, interdependent, and interrelated. So when I look at the phrase, the sorry state of human rights in Singapore, I see two things. On one hand, I see the ghastly dictatorial machinery. I see the lies, distortions, eviscerations, bending and warping of the truth. And I see our government playing semantic games of apologism and rhetoric with the UN or other state bodies that call for LGBT rights or other human rights, basic human rights, rhetoric and apologism. And that's what I see on one hand. I see people like Kelvin Cheng, who has an exceptionally poor understanding of human rights, and yet somehow feels the need to comment about it. He says that human rights is a rich people idea, that it's for armchair philosophers. We sit down, drink whiskey, and talk about human rights. But I fail to comprehend, how is human rights a wealthy thing? Look through the UDHR. Who are the people who would benefit from the implementation, the adherence to the UDHR? The poor. The right to slavery is not something that rich people worry about. The right to not be held a slave, it's not something that rich people worry about. The right to healthcare, right to free speech, the right to a decent standard of living. This is not something that a rich person goes to sleep worrying about. So I asked Calvin Cheng, what are you talking about when you say that human rights is for rich people? And that's the bad end of it when I think of the sorry state of human rights in Singapore. But on the other hand, I also see the work that we've done as civil society, and that we will continue and are continuing to do as activists in Singapore. And yes, maybe the defenders of human rights have let us down. Why is Saudi Arabia on the Council of the United Nations? Why is Aung San Suu Kyi so hesitant to speak in the defense of the Rohingya who are facing genocide? So yes, they may have let us down. But I believe that we in Singapore, we have fought well. We don't have the international fame, the stars, the fandom, and all that sort of publicity. No, we don't have that. But I think we fought the good fight for our own causes. And I think we haven't forgotten the causes of our friends, of civil societies that work alongside us. So yes, that was the congratulatory portion of my speech. And I believe sometimes we do need that encouragement, because I don't think the state has ever thanked us. But there is a topic that I am thoroughly distressed by and I'd like to address as well. Purely because of my perspective as a communications student and as a social media manager. Now, as a millennial, I'm very afraid for human rights. I look at the world that we are growing up in, the world that we are going to inherit, and I see Duterte, Trump, Brexit, Le Pen, Geert Wilders, and Angela Merkel really may be forced to step down in the upcoming election in Germany. The spillover effect in Singapore has been amazing. On social media, there are groups supporting the ideologies of Trump and Duterte. This strange neo-conservative idea that human rights is bad and imperialism is good. In Singapore, these groups were once small, fringe groups, closed, private, little echo chambers for themselves to sort of bash this human rights Western ideal. Now it's becoming ever more prevalent. The groups are numbering in the hundreds of thousands, and they're becoming more and more open. I think you might know this movement that I'm talking about. It's called the alt-right. The central ideology behind these groups, the alt-right, is that, human rights is bad. Let's give up human rights and let's instead go for imperialism and supremacy. This idea that we are better than the other. That human beings are somehow raw material and should compete for the things that they have. And it's a very strange new direction that we're taking. Very strange because at least with conservatives in the past, there was still an underlying respect for human rights. Conservatives in the past, at least, when they spoke about abortion or criminalizing abortion, they would say, oh no, it contravenes the UDHR, which says that every individual has a right to life. At the very least, we could disagree with them, conservatives in the past. We have different ideas. We are the liberals, they are the conservatives. We could have different ideas. Okay? But at least they were speaking the language of human rights. There was at least some sort of reverence for the documents, for the ideas and the philosophies that we had behind human rights. I don't see that anymore. The new wave of conservatives, the new wave of right-wingers and fascists will not be concerned with human rights any longer. To them, it is a hindrance, sort of a block in our bridge towards some sort of hyper-capitalist utopia. So this rejection of human rights in favor of imperialism and supremacy is very alluring. I can see the appeal that it has with the young and with the middle-aged crowd. Human rights emphasizes love and empathy, a care for our neighbor, for every human being and every individual that lives on this earth. The alt-right emphasizes hatred of the other and a return to some sort of romanticized past, that we were somehow better before, when we didn't have things like, when we didn't have, we have our human rights, and we didn't have our conventions, and we didn't have social justice. This whole idea of make America great again. Like we were somehow better before we got civilized and understood how the things that we were doing affected our neighbors. It doesn't help when we have the defenders of human rights, like Aung San and Trudeau, who again are not practicing this idea that human rights are indivisible. It doesn't help. It really helps to push this alt-right agenda, this conservative, this fascist, supremacist idea along. So for me, when we have considered the sorry state of human rights, what do we do about it? How do we adapt to fight it? We can't just sit back and let it take its toll on us, right? The world is changing. Human rights are changing. The internet is changing. And the acceptors and rejectors of human rights are changing. It used to be that human rights were shunned by state loyalists and Asian values enthusiasts. And now it's being shunned and shot down by rich Chinese Singaporeans, ministers, people who create Facebook accounts and think they're somehow public intellectuals. So if we think that the state of human rights is sorry right now, I can envision a hell of a lot worse. What with Trump and Le Pen and Duarte and Wilders coming along. And I believe it will be up to men and women like us to prevent a future like that. I mean, a future that the younger generation and the millennials will someday inherit from us. And that's why I strongly believe, and I'd like to reiterate, that our fight must be inalienable, indivisible, interdependent, and interrelated. Thank you.